Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for us to welcome you here in our office building for this event, which is related to the Brain Bar Budapest event. And there are many presentations and discussions about the innovative future. I mentioned our office building, and we are very proud that when we talk about sustainable development, even our building is the award winner of the Green Certificate of the Green Beam assessment. I believe it's a common knowledge today that sustainable development is important. All major companies and leaders recognize that how important for them, for their business success, to introduce such measures, operations and strategy which lead to the sustainable development for our economies and for the whole society. The challenges which are around us require valid and real answers, and only sustainable development provide those answers with us. There is a constant and steady trend towards sustainable development today, and this is fortunate, and this is supported by this very fundamental business interest, as customers are requiring such behavior from companies, but also, fortunately, it is supported by regulation. So even those companies who would be somewhat reluctant are somewhat forced or encouraged to behave according to the rules. Today is a very special day because we have to be honest for ourselves too. That yesterday a very interesting thing happened, and it happened in the US. Mr. Trump withdrew the US from the Paris deal, which is an agreement on climate protection. This is unfortunate, but I think, and I am sure there will be some answers even today for this act, and this act is not exaggeration, maybe not impolite, but we can say it is a shameful decision by the leaders. But it is also encouraging because what we have heard since then from respected CEOs all over the world, and specifically in the US, that all condemned this decision. So I think there will be quite interesting consequences in the business world, and maybe the business world will be more united after this decision. And those companies, leaders who condemned, there are many energy companies like Shell, Exxon and BP, whom otherwise would be considered as not the most sustainable oriented companies. Even KPMG as a global company is dealing a lot with the sustainable development. Our customers, fortunately, constantly seek advice from us to help them to obtain the necessary know-how regarding sustainable development in terms of strategy, report writing, getting the necessary accreditation, and all the operational items which are the day-to-day operational specific things to or in the sustainable business world. For today, for the presentation and also for the roundtable discussion, I would like to welcome and introduce you Mr. Michael Hastings, the worldwide leader of KPMG in the sustainable development. He is a very respected, well-known leader in this area. KPMG can work for the UN and provide many answers in this area. So he will provide you with a presentation. And after that, there will be a round table. There is no table. Discussion. In which, let me welcome and introduce Mr. Attila Csikán, who is the Business Council the leader of Business Council Sustainable Development of Hungary, Mr. Jörg Bauer, who is the leader of G20. Miss Fabian Agnes from Henkel, and Horváth Imre from Metro. I am sure they can also share you with real practices and their experiences in this world, and you can gain a lot of new information in this area, and of course you can ask relevant questions. Thank you very much. Enjoy the presentation and discussion.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and very grateful to be here on such a warm afternoon. You're used to this. We're not. My son Kenny is traveling with me, and we're also going on to Poland on Sunday for something entirely different with time with students. But it's lovely to be back in Budapest again. I think it's been around 6 years since I was last here. Before I get into the fine detail of my presentation, I wanted to give you one or two pieces of historical perspective, which just might help us reflect on exactly the blowing of a bad trumpet in the last 24 hours. Just going back 2 days ago to 100 years back, May the 29th, 1917, was the birth date of the man who became President Jack Kennedy. And 56 years into his life, he made a speech before the US House of Representatives in which he set out an agenda for one of the most ambitious and undeliverable objectives science had ever considered. It's an infamous speech because it's now known that on the day in which President Kennedy said, "We will put a man on the moon," not a single scientist in NASA had a clue how to do it. And there was much scratching around amongst the scientists of the time that this was an impossible, undeliverable, ridiculous, but fascinating concept. Of course, we all know he didn't survive to the point at which by 1968 we saw the first man on the moon, but I remember that as a young child. And as a young child then, having been born in England, my family had moved to Jamaica in the Caribbean, and even in that somewhat, dare I say, backward environment, I remember watching those live pictures of that incredible black and white occasion as we saw it then in 1968. And back in 1961, nobody conceived that this transformation was possible. Not at all. So yesterday, another president of the United States made what we can all say is a regrettable, even foolish and ideological decision. Park him, he won't be there for very long. Let's think about a different decision made yesterday, or rather announced yesterday, just to encourage you, by the Chinese government, which launched the world's largest ever solar power plant. The size of 40 football pitches floating over once a coal mine area in the middle of China, just by a coastal region which is little known, Keywan province. And there they are, innovation in the extreme. That perception of China as the place of greatest polluting evil next to the United States, with a mindset disregarding its responsibilities, has now become the world's largest investor in renewables. And this is testament to the positive view we need to have. And we need to maintain that perspective irrespective of the announcements of yesterday. It's hugely important to be optimistic. I discovered also yesterday that 78 years ago, the former famous British Prime Minister Winston Churchill wrote a speech back in whatever it would have been, 1931, in which he was positioning thinking, and this is even, well, between the wars, the First World War and the Second World War, he was positioning thinking about what he saw as the technological future. He anticipated a world full of computers, when in fact computers were barely known to anybody outside of academic institutions. They were just not the public would have had no awareness of them. He anticipated genetically modified food. He was even talking about understanding visitors from alien planets. He was probably at that point thinking of the European Union. But that's a bad British joke. We're just worrying about our position at the moment. But the fascinating thing is that history accords many great men and women who have not got themselves locked into the negative drama of the moment, have had anticipation, optimism. And I think we have to approach the announcement of yesterday with that same optimism. The chief executive of the world's largest cash-laden company, Apple, immediately announced yesterday at its valuation at $800 billion that they would continue to invest in and protect the world's natural environment and to enhance the opportunity for renewable energy. These are amazingly important steps. Business leaders are not going to be cowed by negative political pressure. And so we must approach our thinking about these issues with that mindset. Innovation and opportunity combined together. And I see what happened yesterday as an opportunity for further investment, for more transformation, for a greater public mindset, and to be optimistic about a sustainable world. We need it and we must have it. So let me take you through one or two thoughts before we have a panel discussion. Making the global goals local business. And I'm assuming that all of you are familiar with these 17 guideposts. I like to think of them as ambitious targets which are intended to give us one key overriding theme: dignity for those who are outside of the same privileges we so easily take for granted. At the same time as yesterday's announcement was being made, the leading NGOs of the world, non-governmental organizations, were just stepping up their 4th grant campaign for the largest ever food crisis the world has faced since the Second World War. We forget the fact that there are still 890 million people in our planet who don't have a single meal a day, and sometimes battle up to 3 days without anything significant to eat. So we have to keep a balance that dignity is not to be found in every corner of our planet. We've seen great releases of resource here through what we used to call Eastern Europe, right the way through to the West. Worth remembering that if you track back to the 1700s, periods of time in our history as a world, most people were in some form of desperation and starvation. We did not have mass affluence. But here we are, where we do. And we mustn't disregard those who are outside of these privileges. I'm conscious when I went to a concert in Mumbai in November last year. It's a nice thing to fly to Mumbai to attend a Coldplay concert for an evening and fly home again. It was kind of a nice, strange thing to do, but it was fun. And the whole point of going to a Coldplay concert in Mumbai was to assist the organization Global Citizen with the emphasis they were making to bring about the biggest ever surge for sanitation that India has seen. More people struggle in India without toilets than any other place in the world. The consequence of that one concert event with the organization Global Citizen led to a commitment from aid agencies to over $600 billion of investment in sanitation systems for India. So the world is an optimistic place, but there's so much we must change. How are we going to respond to this increasingly uncertain world? Well, I've given you one trigger, first of all, innovation and optimism, but here's another one, which of course you don't need the detailed reminding of what this represents. But here's a tiny piece of perspective. I grieve for those affected by the bomb in Manchester just over 2 weeks ago. But just 4 days ago, the largest ever bomb went off in Baghdad, killing 80 people and maiming over 400 others. And we are very easily consumed with what happens in the comfortable places of the world and very dismissive of the uncomfortable places. We have to have equal grief for both. Our world is a sad and complicated place. This is driving, as you know, the biggest ever migration as a consequence of political attack that the world has seen, the displacement of nearly 7 million people now between Jordan and the Lebanon outside of Syria. Exactly the point I was making about the world's hunger crisis is becoming, again, an uncomfortable reminder. Those of us old enough to remember that 1980s image. Do you remember the images from the 80s of those whited tents across Ethiopia? It was then described as the most devastating famine, but now here we are. It's considerably worse. And why is that? Well, partly it is simply because our systems are based on a fundamental inequality. One part of the world grows wealth, and another part of the world struggles to find it, even though it sits on the largest ever resources known to man. More arable land in the continent of Africa than anywhere else available for farming, more people available for education and for industry and investment, and more minerals that could fuel the future that is required. But corruption is an ugly driving force. More money stolen from the continent every year than is ever received in aid or foreign direct investment. And this uncomfortable juxtaposition, something again, when Kennedy gave his speech in 1961, we would never have contemplated. It wasn't within our mindset to see the extremes of wealth that have been created and delivered around the planet, leading to this movement. I remember seeing the tented city outside of St. Paul's Cathedral in London just a few years ago, when people protested against big brand companies who said that they were the 99% battling with the 1%. The fight for justice is a very real and compelling fight. And people are basically saying, look, the planet is crowded, the poor are coming here, they're coming to where there is a need to find resource and freedom, and the reactions are getting ever stronger. Just yesterday, 44 people were found dead in the Sahara. They were in the back of a van that had set off from northern Ghana. It's the first time recorded of a number of Ghanaians killed in the process of crossing the Sahara to get to a port at the edge of Libya in order to go on a boat across to Europe. But while the world is preoccupied with other things, we're forgetting that this migration crisis continues. Those 44 Ghanaians died of thirst. Their van broke down in the middle of the Sahara Desert. There was no water on board. And why are they coming? Because life here is sweet. So these sustainable development goals matter to us, but not necessarily to everyone. It is easy to wrap ourselves in the flag of nationalism. And that flag of nationalism is a convenience. It has been used in the Dutch elections, the French elections, the Austrian elections, very close to home here. It has been part of the Brexit considerations in the United Kingdom, and it was central to the conversations in the United States last year, leading to the election of Donald Trump. Let's protect what we have. Make our nation great again. Whereas world responsibility, the Sustainable Development Goals, say to us that we have a duty to a planet, not just to our people. We have a duty of protection and not just of protectionism. And we have the desire for prosperous dignity for the mass and not just the opportunity for the few. Just a little bit more of a deep dive on this one. There's really only one major point I wanted to make about the images that you are very familiar with, and I realize that these have been, in some cases, quite close to home in the last 2 years, with Hungary operating very much as a transit location, people passing through. It was this image, as you know, which probably caused the leaders of the European Union to sit up and say, it's about time we took it seriously. The outcome of the about time we took it seriously was, as you know, a deal with Turkey to contain the numbers, and a rather limp agreement between the then 28 member states of the European Union to, quote unquote, invest in preventative measures to stop people making exactly the journey that the 44 Ghanaians made yesterday and died in the Sahara. A very low level of investment in African infrastructure and development, and very little to do with preventing the chaos in Syria. Here are some of the uncomfortable figures. And it's the third block that really gets to me. It's the average refugee child or internally displaced child spends 17 years in a camp away from home and away from education. And the numbers are huge. So if we think that there is a brewing possibility of an angry group of many millions, the consequence of which will come banging on our doors in the future, yes, that is exactly right. We are storing up trouble in the light of our disregard for their needs. Now, these Sustainable Development Goals brought 200 of the world's countries together. September 2015, we were given a 15-year timeline to 2030. So here we are. We're now at 13 years. The clock is ticking fast. These are the principles under which the Sustainable Development Goals were brought about. But the reality of the figures sits there exactly as you can see on the left of your screen. Still high levels of starvation and need. Income disparities at their most extreme. Millions, hundreds of millions of people outside of even the opportunity for a lunch that we just equally shared. So the decision was, let us agree on 17 goals, 169 targets that lie behind them, and get serious about the business. So the question for a business like KPMG is, what do we do in the light of that? And we decided that what we would do is focus on lifelong learning. We would be very keen to build a framework that supported quality education. We wanted to have a discussion with our countries around the world and our partner organizations about how to build a more educated, literate, and confident community. Again, stunning statistics which challenge our assumptions that the world is all the same way as we are. And business has responded. This, just one example. Fortune magazine's Change the World Index, the first time they published a list of 50 companies which have dramatically changed the prospects of the poorest people on the planet. Pleased to say, number one, Vodafone, which backed the M-Pesa mobile money transfer system. Unilever, which has had this passionate desire to ensure that its purpose should be about empowering the 1 billion people in the planet most out of place with the resources they need. Pearson's, the great educational publisher, backing literacy provision. Ourselves at KPMG investing in renewable villages, particularly one we focused on in Tanzania. And you can see the map of activity that tells you exactly what countries are pioneering and how we are leading on these issues. So in order to help our clients, we took a decision that we had to create these Sustainable Development Goals matrices. 6 documents which allow whatever industry you're from chemicals and manufacturing through to agriculture, to technology, to banking and finance, to insurance and industry, telecoms, to be able to know what to do in the light of what's being done. So they are available on our website, kpmg.com/global goals. They're free to use, each one of them containing a minimum of 200 examples, up to 380 examples of what industry and business can do to fulfill the demands of the Sustainable Development Goals. And here is why.
We can be.
We must be
The first generation to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined.
to fight injustice and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
With no one.
goes hungry.
Where no one wakes in the morning asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has died.
Diseases we know how to cure. And where proper health care
It's a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where
Everyone goes to school
and education gives us the knowledge.
and skills.
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to
Thrive.
And be powerful.
And safe.
We cannot succeed if others can.
We will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water.
And proper toilets at home,
at school and work.
We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone,
heat, light,
And power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper.
A new wealth.
Lead to essentials.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world
Where our industry
Our infrastructure and our
best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
we will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of equality
Are defeated inside our countries and between different countries.
Where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone.
where we replace
What we consume.
Planet where we put back.
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back from climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas. We will restore and protect
Life on land.
The forests.
Animals.
the earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
and the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
And she says, thank you. If you're an implementer, a doer, and a change maker. So I want to bring up my panel if I can, and we're going to have a conversation together. Forgive me if I don't say names correctly. Jorgbauer, give him a round of applause. It's great that he's come here this afternoon. Thank you, Jorg. Attila Chikan, thank you. Agnes Fabian, and Imre Hoverith. I'm going to ask each one of you just an opening question, and then we can have a more rounded conversation. Let me start, Jorg, with you, because GE is, if I'm correct, and forgive me if I'm not correct, but you're the oldest American company on the New York Stock Exchange, if I remember correctly. Going back over 100 years?
Yeah, 100. We just had 2 weeks ago, we had our 125th birthday.
125th birthday,
Yeah.
and you're the only company that was on the that survives. Exactly.
That's correct, yeah.
And you've become a company closely associated with sustainable solutions.
That's correct. I mean, if you look at, we can look at it from two ways. So one way is obviously when you think technology. So if you had the 6 industries that you had before, we're in 4 of the 6.
Yes.
We just exited the 5th, which would be financial services. Otherwise, we would almost cover all of them. But we pride ourselves of developing solutions for sort of the, as we call it, the toughest challenges of society. So think about basic infrastructure, sustainable energy, mobility, health. We are basically doing all these things that emerging markets would need.
Yes.
On the other hand, we are also, particularly here in Hungary, and I guess we will talk about that a bit, very much committed to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Would you say, you've been known for particularly a big area of industry innovation, which has been alternative energy sourcing. And has that been a big profit driver for you?
Well, as we see it, I mean, we have actually the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
So we basically have any kind of energy sources, really wing to wing, I would say. 1/3 of global electricity is being produced on GE technology.
Yes.
The growth, the fastest growing sector within that is renewables, but it's still, there's a very sizable sector still in fossil and other kinds of energy sources.
And as an American company, it hasn't got through to President Trump that you've grown your business on renewables.
Well, I mean, our chairman, Jeff Immelt, has been very outspoken.
Very, yes.
Very outspoken.
Yes.
Which is not usual. I mean, companies are not normally making political statements.
Yes.
But in this case, he made an exception, if you want to, and very, very strongly supported the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals.
Oh, we're disappearing into the dark. We need some new energy.
Not our technology, must be competition.
It is kind of restful, isn't it? Let me turn to you, Agnes, and just so Henkel, as a drinks manufacturer, a drinks producing company, how do you see yourselves in the light of these sustainable development goals? You're seeking people's well-being, and as a company, where do you fit in that picture?
So Henkel has 3 different business units. One is the most known maybe for the consumer, which is the detergent range. And we have beauty care products, and we have, which is actually half of our business, this is adhesives and also technology adhesives industry. So our company was last year 140 years old, and our founder, and the founder, Fritz Henkel's motto was, when he established his company in Aachen in Germany, that he wants to produce products which makes the life of people easier, more comfortable, and more health. So, and that was not changed during the 140 years, because still the products what leaves the Henkel production plants, these are sustainable products. What does it mean? It means that each innovations, what we bring to the market, it has to pass an innovation gate, 6 innovation gate. And that means that each product cycle has 6 checkpoints where we check that this is really a sustainable product, so from the idea point of view. So just some examples, how can we produce products which is really for washing, for example, making still better the life of people. We have new technology, which is a small detergent cap in a foil, which is absorbable 100%. Using also or getting the power with lower temperature water. So really teaching, educate the people to use the products really only in a certain quantities what is needed, and also using less electricity for washing. Or, for example, another adhesive example, so how to make it sustainable and having a healthier life around the people. We have a kids dedicated adhesive, which is a Pritt stick. It's a school stick. And this is 90% sustainable products, and this is the main ingredient is potato. So it's even if a small kid wants to take a piece of it because it looks nice and also to taste it, it's no problem because it's really potato. So this is how to make easier and more healthy the surrounding, the life of people, having also teaching them for the proper product usage.
Would it be the case here in Hungary that...
The same, yeah.
So does the consumer understand what the innovation is allowing them to do?
I think it's also not the expectations of a consumer are changed, because really the people, and we really can observe it, that they expect to have an innovation which is also sustainable. That's really the expectation. And they also do expect it that we communicate. So the education and gathering information on the products, it is already a kind of must have. So we learned that also in the communication towards the customers, that's appreciated and even wished.
Attila, just tell us about your company and about how you've approached responding to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here as the youngster, because our company is only 10-year-old. But thanks to that, partially, our core business is sustainability, because our main mission is to help industrial customers to have sustainable energy systems. That actually means that, this holy triangle of sustainable energy, price efficiency, yes, cost efficiency, reliability, and clean energy should be all together. And this creates a triangle, and all companies have an optimum point within that, and we find them to find where it is. Of course, as every strategy, this is dynamic, which means that this is a moving target. So the SDG goal 17, which is partnership, is very important to us, because this is only applicable if this is a long-term partnership, not one of business.
Do you need, have you needed government to provide a framework of law in order to grow the business, because there's now a demand for sustainable solutions, or is it coming anyway from customers?
Well, my opinion is the same as in relation with yesterday's announcement of Mr. Trump, that we shouldn't wait for the governments. We should try to communicate with them, and we should try to help them to create an environment which is friendly for us. But if it's not happening, that doesn't mean that we should stop the activity. This should mean that we should fasten. Yes. And we should keep together and have the strategy what we will do in such an environment that we are today. Hungarian government actually, let's say, supporting partially those. We have a renewable strategy, we have a renewable mandatory takeover system, but which is still missing is actually the comprehensive approach of those measures actually in energy. Well, we keep working on that.
And Hungary is a signatory to the Paris Climate Accord.
Yes.
So that would mean that there has to be a wide range of mitigation strategies and also alternative energy strategies put into place. And where do you feel you are as a country on implementation?
Well, I would say that, of course, we should be in the first percentages among 200 countries. But, we are members of the European Union. We should be, and we are proud of our history, we are proud of our economy, we are proud of our present. Hungary was one of the first country who ratified the Paris Climate Agreement. So I don't think we should be in the first 20%. It should be the first 5%, and this is still missing.
And where are you on that? Do you feel you are in the first 5%?
Well, actually, as a company, we are trying to apply, the state-of-the-art solutions. So I think with our partners, we should be in the edge of the world, because I don't think that GE or Henkel would be interested in which country you are. You have to meet with the same quality measures and with the same operational principles.
Now, Imre, you as a, if I'm understood it correctly, a very big supermarket retail network. correct? Around,
almost.
oh, is it the very
it's
big?
It's a business to business wholesale.
Business to business, okay. And so how much are you aware that that those who are your customers from business are sensitized to these issues and the sustainability energy questions?
This is really where I see an opportunity for Metro. There is a unique opportunity for us, as we are in a B2B wholesale business. So we take goods from a number of suppliers, and then we help our customers to actually succeed in their businesses. These are typically small, medium-sized businesses in Hungary. We supply about 300,000 of them. Globally, this number is more than 50 million. So through these customers, if we can get any message, any values through to them on sustainability, or solutions even better, we can reach up to 1 billion people in the world with the message, with the solution, and we can impact them on the sustainability agenda as well. I'm very proud that earlier this year, Metro actually reached the #1 position on the global Dow Jones Sustainability Index within our within our business group. So
and how did you achieve that?
I think we took sustainability in its most complex possible interpretation. So I think way beyond the environmental responsibility where it originally maybe came from. And we act and work systematically on all of the angles globally. One of the key elements for us, as we are working with thousands and thousands of suppliers, is responsible sourcing, which starts from, for example, factory audits in Asia, but it goes all the way to how we help small growers in Hungary, so they are able to meet the requirements of a multinational company, can work with us, and also can work and supply others.
Would you tell me if I got this wrong, but would you say to those that you are purchasing from, the supply chain further down the line, that their business is going to be bigger, better, if they apply the principles you want, or are you just going to tell them it's going to cost them more?
There are two approaches, actually. Some of our competitors simply put into a contract that these are the standards that you have to meet, and that is one way of forcing, certainly. We believe in actually engaging these suppliers. Many of them, thankfully, are already recognize this, especially the big international companies, so there is no forcing needed, including Henkel, for example. But with many smaller companies, this may not be the immediate priority for them, so we can help them to recognize the midterm benefits of sustainability.
So you would actually get involved with the smaller suppliers and help them to reshape?
Yes, this is one of our big commitments in every country, including Hungary, to help the small suppliers to work also in this area and provide them ready-made solutions that they can take and apply.
And what is your perception of the consumer in Hungary and also in surrounding countries? Is the consumer sensitive to these issues? Not the B2B, but just the person who is ultimately buying the product at the end. Are they sensitive? Do they care?
This is a question that we receive very frequently, especially in Eastern European countries. Can you actually work on the communication agenda? Does it make really sense? Do people care? Or you just have to do it with the more like-minded partners and suppliers? My view is that this has been changing very fast. What gives me a big encouragement is seeing the young people who are joining our company. And on the first day when I talked to them, they say that I recognize that one of the key decision points for them is actually the values that the company has, including sustainability. They can find a decent workplace with a decent salary, many choices in Hungary, in Budapest particularly. But this aspect, the values and what they care for beyond making Metro successful, is increasingly important. And I think this is a very, very encouraging thing. And I see this from my children as well.
So just picking up that point with you, Jörg, about it's often said, and I hear it often in KPMG, we talk about our young recruits coming in. They're the ones who care passionately about the environment, which sort of suggests that those of us slightly older, one exception on the panel, but do not care as much. And is it your experience across such a vast company like GE, when you meet your colleagues around the world, do they care about this meaningfully, or are they doing it because Jeff is on the button?
Well, I think we had started, I mean, even before 2015, with our own commitment. We had a 2020 goal we called Eco-Imagination.
That's right.
Eco-Imagination, where we wanted to reduce CO2 in production by 20% until 2020. And we are there. We are a for-profit company. So what we realized, there is actually no contradiction between environmental friendly and making money. Because when you think CO2, that's usually fuel consumption. Fuel consumption costs money.
Yes.
So if you can reduce that, like for example, you mentioned you flew to Mumbai. There's a 2/3 chance you had the plane was using our engines.
Yes,
and
it was actually. I looked out, it was.
So you safely got there and returned. That's perfect. No, I mean, the point is obviously as we are dropping the energy consumption of those engines, which is one of the biggest variable cost of any airline, we are doing something for the airline. We are still enabling mobility, but we are also saving a little bit of the planet. So we are not saying, obviously, we are not going to stop international travel. Like another example, in Africa, 60% of the energy is made with GE equipment.
Yes.
I've just been to Zimbabwe, and we met the local chief in one of the tribes. So basically, talking as we are sort of naive, we talked about STEM education. So what about educating your children there with computers, coding? Because we had this idea that, you know, managers are sort of quick fix. So you go like, why don't you teach them to code, and then, you know, they can have a brilliant future. So the guy goes like, well, I have no water and no electricity in the school. So then you go like, okay, then it's difficult to do coding and all the other things. So the point is, what you described, the young employees that we have, called the millennials, we have hired probably 1,500 over the last 3 years here in Budapest. They're probably much less ready to compromise than we were. So I think we were a bit more pragmatic, realistic. We needed the money, we needed the job, we wanted to progress. While for the typical 25-year-old nowadays, the value, the impact, the meaning is even more important than the money. And I see that when people are leaving jobs without having another job lined up, which would have been absolutely unthinkable.
We would never have done that.
Unthinkable for but they go like, oh, there's no point to do what I'm doing now, I just leave. So while we are sort of going in that direction anyhow, we get a big push now from bottom up, which is really very helpful.
How would you reflect on that within your company? Is it the millennials that are driving the change, or is it the business owners who get the point?
Sorry, for me?
No, sorry, for Till. Yes. Oh, sorry. I've got the wrong way around. Yes, Agnes, sorry. There you go.
So I was a little bit so confused. The question is the same kind of, so what about the young generation and the expectation, So actually I think the surrounding and the environment of also the working places and the work-life balance is much more important for the young generation, for the younger colleagues than it was for us in the past. And I also share the opinion that they are not ready to compromise on it at all. They want to learn, they want to be proud of, and to be proud of that belongs to that also, that I'm doing something good.
Yeah.
And I think for this generation it's a huge value which we have to feed. And so I think also with working environment, with the jobs, what they do, education and communication, this is a part of it. So with the younger colleagues, I also feel more that this value comes to the company, and they are very happy if it's already established there. So I think it's a positive.
So for your business, if you were to look at these 17 objectives, and number 17 is partnership, so just look at the 16, which are so more in the doing side. Where would your business which would you want to pick out and say, that's our flagship, that's our key one?
I wouldn't change the motto, which is for us that making something out of our company which supports people's life and in all the senses. So health, no poverty, future, something good for their homes, for their families. So I think those points which are bringing to this direction, which are plenty of, that will stay also for the next 140 years. I wouldn't change that. And that's interesting that this direction was not changed.
Yes, yeah, it was there from the beginning.
That's success. And maybe just one remark to the point, the question you asked, Dirk, that sustainability and money, and profitability. So is it a contradiction if you put more money for sustainability than you lose? No. So my point is also that the sustainability is also supporting your business power, because you save cost, you increase your efficiency, so you take off points which are not necessary to the business. I think it's really a part of the business decision. If you are not sustainable, that you will lose. You will not be in the top companies, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Imre, what would you pick out of these 17 that you'd apply to Metro? Where would you go?
Based on what I just explained, the sustainable citizen communities is where I think we can make the biggest impact through our customers, through our partners. But maybe there is another area which in Hungary I'm very proud of is no hunger, or reducing the hunger in Hungary. In the past 6 years we have been working with Food Bank. We established first in Hungary the relationship with them, and provided more than 1 billion forint worth of fresh ingredients for people who can then have at least once a day ready meal for them. Yeah. And we are supporting 45,000 people who would otherwise not have this one nutritious meal a day.
And do you make that prominently known?
We have not pushed so much on the PR side of that. Maybe there would be more opportunity on this.
I sometimes wonder sometimes in business we kind of, we do hide our light a little bit and don't get out there and sing the song that we've created ourselves. It's very important if we're going to make these.
It's very important for us internally. So on our monthly gathering, when I meet with our managers, we always also talk about this number, not only on the sales and profit of the month. I think which is very encouraging and also reinforces the values for our colleagues.
Let me just ask you a question, Attila, which is about the 169 targets that lie behind these 17 goals. We're not going to put up all the targets now. I think we'd drown if we did. But did as a piece of perspective, in a way, as sort of a consultancy, did you think that many targets was the right number to have? Was it too many for business to absorb, or do you find business kind of gets it?
Well, it's a kind of menu in my view, and actually that's exactly what we are doing at BCSDH in Hungary. We are trying to select of those which are relevant for the country, relevant to our member companies, and we are trying to have them to go forward with a few, but with real results, with real efficiency. Just to join to Jörg and Agnes in a very positive way. I would say that it's not only a competitive advantage that if you are sustainable as a company, but it also keeps you awake, It means that if you keep thinking on new solutions, keep thinking on sustainability, that means that you are governing a company which have a very flexible and a very state-of-the-art way of thinking. Therefore, you can have a state-of-the-art strategy. And I think that's what makes you leading in your industry or in your country. Yeah. So actually, you shouldn't try to follow not 168, but I think you should have goals that you can keep in your mind. I don't think that any in this room could list the 168 by heart. So that's my.
So we have now 12 minutes where we can ask questions of the panel or of me if you want to. Feel free, anybody who would like to posit a question or a thought. If it's a sermon, a long reflection, keep it to yourself. But if it's a question, then great. Anybody? Anybody want to vent fury at Donald Trump? István, yes.
István Szabó from KPMG in Hungary. I'd like to ask you about the goal number 17, which is about partnerships for goals. Do you have any concrete examples in Hungary? How do you cooperate with other companies in order to make these goals happen? Thank you.
You mean next at BCSDH?
Is that sufficient? Or do you want to say anything?
Well, maybe, I mean, very, very recently, we have been partnering up with ÖKA. Andras is here. Maybe you can, yeah. On implementing a, whatever you will call it, a chapter of Impact 2030 for Hungary. And what we are doing now, you had a slide where you showed basically the KPMG allocation of, let's say, focus areas on the SDGs. So we're working now, there's quite a few GE people here in the room. We're working now on doing exactly that. And while we are touching a lot of them with technology, we are now looking really at the soft side of things, if you want to. So what can we add when particularly we're thinking about pro bono volunteering, so skill-based volunteering.
Yes.
And we are partnering with quite a few companies here. KPMG is one of them. While we believe that in this area we can share and we actually get out more. So it's not a commercial activity, it's not a competitive activity. So we're promoting skill-based volunteering in Hungary, and we see some very nice results over the last 2 or 3 years already. So that's what we do in SDG 17.
Brilliant. Okay, others want to question? Nobody want to say anything? Reflecting on yesterday? Has all been said? Any questions to the panel? Okay, I'm going to throw a question at each one of them then in that case, which is really to ask them the same question. I mentioned at the beginning, President Kennedy's "Let's put a man on the moon." And just think of all the innovation and science and hard graft mind thinking that it took to get there. And then we come to the point where now China has unveiled yesterday, probably quite deliberately yesterday, the world's largest 40 megawatt solar power plant. And we've seen incredible changes in technology that have made our lives, some cases, so much easier. Fascinating to think that Tesla, which I'm sure there are many roving around the streets of Budapest, is a company valued more than Ford, which is one of America's largest ever motor manufacturing companies. But its market valuation is less than that of Tesla, which only has a few 100,000 products out there in the world. Where would you want to see another innovation to respond to this? What do you think we need? There's lots of technology we clearly don't need, like Snapchat, but where would you... See, I just knew that would test a few of you. But where is an innovation we want? What do you think we need? You? Go on.
I would think that technology will be okay. I mean, there will be revolutions, there will be developments and everything else. But we have to keep developing is shared economy and using less and less resources, because there is, I would say, an instinct of human being to have own ownership. And I don't think I want to introduce communism here after 40 years of trial, of course, but everyone knows that this is absolutely not the same. And we can, we will produce our goods and services in more and more effective and sustainable way, but it would be also very important to consume less. And consume less doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that we have to decrease our way of living, but it should mean that that we work on sharing each other.
Sharing, so the more the sharing economy. Now, we've probably only gone there with transport to a large extent, people sharing cars and then use of...
sharing cars, accommodation in tourism.
Yeah.
And I think there are several other potential...
But what if we told our neighbors via the phone that actually our dishwasher was only a quarter full, anybody got plates, bring them round? And
well, I would say that, you know, for just an example, 90% of your equipment, household equipment, is used only 2-3% of the time.
Yes.
So it's no reason to keep them and consuming electricity in a standby mode for 24 hours.
Yes. Agnes, where would you go? What innovation do we need?
I would like to have some huge technology step in healthcare and medical. Really to help people to stay more health and have a longer life, and for all of us. So I think there are already a lot of steps in medical technology, but really having the connection to the people to help it, maybe without a doctor or without the hospital service, which is not available everywhere. So somehow I think that would be a huge step. And as a second wish, maybe is to change the mentality of Trump-like people. So really that understand that we are responsible for our planet.
Yes. Now that's called education, which is a very old technology. Yeah. And
good. Also.
But your point about health is a very important one, because the move is towards preventative health, isn't it? Helping people to understand what keeps them healthier rather than having to rush to doctors. And do you think that's linked again to our mobiles?
Yeah, definitely. Mobiles, watches, smart communication, easy communication, accessibility. So I think that should be the an added value for the people for the future.
Yeah. And where would you go with an innovation?
I believe that small businesses play a very critical role in our development. They tend to be faster, more agile, sometimes more keen to understand customer needs and adapt themselves to that. And it's even more critical, I think, for developing economies. And where I would like to see big innovation is solutions that enable these small businesses that they can leapfrog the technology that is currently only available to big business, so they can compete on fair grounds. And I think this will help a lot in countries in Africa and Asia to be able to equalize some of the disadvantage that they suffer from today.
I came across somebody a year ago who was arguing that in order to protect European farmers, we should not import vegetation from outside the European Union. We should grow everything within the European Union that we need. And you then give them the alternative argument that actually that disadvantages the poor Mexican farmer, the Bolivian farmer, the Kenyan farmer. So we basically end up just closing our borders on farming. I mean, would you make the argument that a sustainable world means we have to open where we get our products from?
It's relatively easy to make an argument in Hungary because we have tried the opposite model for 40 years.
Yes.
And the industry that came out of that was completely unable to compete. So it's quite clear that if you close in, you're going to get slower and you're going to not grow, you're not going to develop.
Yeah, exactly. Where would you go on innovation?
Energy storage. So that's the one thing that would change the world probably the most dramatically. When you look at electricity, you have to produce it basically constantly. You don't know the demands, so you have to always have an excess capacity installed, particularly with